is Indian country today.
Escali, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Talahongva. The president of the Ho-Chunk Nation in Wisconsin is requiring employees to wear a face covering. Marlon White Eagle says employees, if they are medically able to tolerate one, must wear a face covering when they enter tribal buildings. The nation is already under a state of emergency declaration due to the coronavirus pandemic. There have been 9 confirmed tests and 2 deaths reported by the Ho-Chunk Nation. Senator John McCoy is retiring today from the Washington State Senate. He is Tulalip and has served for 17 years. McCoy says it's been an honor of a lifetime to serve the people of his district, which includes his tribe. During his tenure, he helped increase voting rights, passed a groundbreaking dental therapy bill, and improved telecommunications for the Tulalip tribe. McCoy also established Native American Heritage Day, which honors tribal history. He says his retirement will give him more time to spend with his family, which includes his wife, 3 daughters, 10 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. His term ends in 2022. A temporary appointment will be named and will serve through the November elections. A warning from the Better Business Bureau about the Facebook challenge to post your senior photo with the hashtag Class of 2020. The BBB says hackers can use that information, which includes your high school name, the year you graduated, and even your high school mascot. These are common security questions online, and the BBC says hackers can take that information and use it against you. And there are more scams aimed at people waiting for their economic impact payment. Watch for Dalton Walker's story this weekend on IndianCountryToday.com. Now let's go to Jourdan Bennett-Begaye for the latest numbers on the rise of COVID cases in Indian country. Jourdan?
Yate Patty, Yate Shikesto Shidinee. So as of April 16th, we now have a total of 1,397 cases within the Indian health system. Again, that's 1,397 cases and a total of 55 deaths as of yesterday, April 16th, 2020. And a lot of these cases did come from, again, the Navajo Nation. They saw an increase of 121 cases and 3 more deaths too. And so now that brings their total of the Navajo Nation to 1,042 cases within their tribal nation and 41 deaths. Also, Gateway Pueblo or Santo Domingo Pueblo in New Mexico also have their first 2 confirmed cases within their community that was reported by the Santo Domingo Health Center. And Ho-Chunk Nation also saw an increase of cases too. They have a total of 9 cases and 2 deaths as reported by the Ho-Chunk Nation Department of Health, Patty.
It's again, it's startling to see that the Navajo Nation has the highest numbers in not just the number of confirmed tests, but also in deaths. How are they handling this load of patients?
Yeah, they're definitely trying to get more PPE, and they're trying their best to get more testing kits out there. And as the Navajo Nation did say before, these numbers are going to increase as more testing becomes available to them. Right now, they are getting the Abbott test, which is when you can get the test results within 13 minutes or under that. They're also trying to, establish curfews again. Last week, President Nez did say that was very successful, so they're looking ahead to do that once again. But they really are trying to communicate through social media, through radio, and through town halls to encourage people to, stay home and to protect their loved ones.
Jourdan, that's 1,397 positive cases in Indian country with a total of 55 deaths. That is an increase, but again, as more testing comes available, those numbers will continue to go up. So for the second weekend in a row, the Navajo Nation will go on a curfew that will last the entire weekend. And we understand also next weekend, they're planning for that. And we also understand there's another tribe, I believe a Sioux tribe, that is also going on a curfew this weekend. And again, it's all the effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And again, there is no cure for this, and you do not need to show symptoms if you are a carrier. So really important to stay home. Jourdan Bennett-Begaye, thank you.
Get it, Patty.
This is Indian Country Today. This is Indian Country Today. This is Indian Country Today.
Welcome back. We have our Reporters Roundtable today, and we're joined from Oneida, Wisconsin, by Chris Johnson, and he's a reporter at the Kalihwisaks paper, which covers the Oneida Nation. Also today on our program is Joaqlin Estus, and she's our national correspondent for Indian Country Today. Welcome, Chris, and welcome, Joaqlin.
Sigoli. Greetings, Patty.
Thank you. So what's going on, Chris? We haven't heard much from your part of the country. What have you been covering when it comes to this pandemic?
Well, right now, Oneida has experienced a lot of the same issues and concerns that everybody across Indian country is experiencing at this time, that including uncertainty with what's happening, uncertainty with employment, things of that nature. So as of late, or the last numbers that we have here in Oneida, we had 5 confirmed cases of coronavirus amongst our membership. At this time, I'm happy to say that all 5 are believed to have recovered completely.
Well, that's good news. It's been a trying time, and as we look at the models, we're not out of the woods yet, and so we've got a ways to go before this virus is contained, and in a longer time before we have any kind of vaccine for that. And you mentioned the economic impact. Talk a little bit more about that. What would specifically, in terms of economic impact, is hurting the Oneida people?
Well, at this point right now, the biggest economic impact for us is our gaming facility was shut down. As of the date of March 19th, our gaming directors and our leadership got together and decided they needed to shut the facilities down, obviously with the social distancing guidelines happening. Now, we took that movement in advance of Governor Evers' safer at home orders, which he enacted on March 24th. Which, interestingly enough, yesterday, March 16th, he extended those stay-at-home orders or safer-at-home orders until May 26th, excuse me. So we're looking at well over another 5 to 6 weeks of this, and it's really challenging. We had to shut the facilities down, and we had to enact mass layoffs of employees. Now, our membership, we have approximately 17,000 members on our rolls. And we had approximately 3,000 employees working for our gaming facilities and throughout other business entities within our organization. And we had to let 2,000 of them go. So that's extremely challenging. We're keeping just under 1,000 employees, critical care and critical need areas that need to be maintained. So the 2,000 that were let go, obviously this is extremely stressful, challenging, and the stay-at-home order extension is going to be a little more stressful on these people.
And what is the news on the per capita payments for the tribal members?
At this time, unfortunately, because the casino was such a big part of our capital, of our income, we had to suspend per capita payments across the board. My understanding at the time was that we were going to keep the elder per capita as well, but everything per capita wise across the board had to be cut, had to be suspended for this year. So it's a very trying and stressful time. Fortunately, we have a strong government leadership in place, and they're doing everything they can in their power to look out for our people and to keep the critical areas that need to be running.
You mentioned there's still care for the elders.
There is care. We do have an elder care facility that is still up and running, and they're doing that. They are obviously social distancing and not allowing visitors in to see them at this time for their own safety. So we do care for our elders. We do meal deliveries, things of that nature. And our healthcare facility is still one of the areas that I mentioned before, one of our critical care areas. And that continues to run, although albeit with limitations. But as far as the elders are going, they're definitely on the top of our list in how we try to take care of them first and foremost.
So it's been, hard for everybody, in all of our tribal communities. and for your tribe, looking at the impact there, and especially when it comes to the gaming industry, and even your newspaper staff. You are operating on a limited weekday work week.
That is correct. We have been scaled back hours. We've been asked to come back in limited time, limited hours, just to try to help save our nation some money. And I'm working on reduced hours. Our staff was cut down from 4 to myself. We do have one other person that does kind of bounce between departments that's helping out and assisting as well. But yes, it's been really, really stressful and a trying time for everybody in our nation across the board.
Now, what have you heard about your tribe applying for any of the money with the CARES Act? Are they in that process right now?
Unfortunately, I don't have enough knowledge to speak knowledgeably on this topic. However, what I can say is that our leadership does hold bi-weekly live feeds, much like what we're doing right now, on our Oneida Nation government page and on the Kalihwisaks Facebook page. And our next broadcast, and they may cover several topics, and this may be one of them, but those conversations take place typically every Monday and Friday at noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern. Again, regarding the CARES Act, unfortunately, at this point, I don't have enough information to speak on that topic.
All right, so we're following that story, and let me go to Joaqlin, because that's been, it kind of has created a contentious week with tribes looking at the funding, the $8 billion in the CARES Act that's designated for tribal governments. Joaqlin, what can you tell us about that?
So under the CARES Act, there's a section that allocates money to local governments and tribes. And the definition that's in the CARES Act references a definition in the Indian Self-Determination and Educational Assistance Act of 1974. And it, in that definition, includes Alaska Native for-profit corporations. So tribes, especially in the lower 48, have been raising concerns because there are 550 something Native federally recognized tribes in the country. There are about 200 regional and local village or urban for-profit corporations in Alaska. So if they're all going to get a chunk of the money that goes to tribes, that's a big chunk. And so tribes are concerned about that, but they're also making accusations that the decision was swayed or even made by Tara Sweeney, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Interior for Indian Affairs. And she's led the consultations that the Department of Interior has had with tribes about all of this. She's a former vice president of the largest or most profitable corporation, Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. And Arctic Slope will get money out of this as a consequence of a decision that was made at the Department of Interior.
Yes, so and it is a lot of numbers. There are a lot of numbers in the story. There are 200 village corporations in Alaska, 229 Alaska Native village governments, and then there are the 12 regional corporations that you mentioned. Arctic Slope Regional Corporation being being the largest and wealthiest. And then in the lower 48, there are 574 federally recognized tribes. So all of these entities are looking for a portion of that $8 billion. And in an interview I had at the first of the week with Fawn Sharp, who is the president of the National Congress of American Indians, she called the $8 billion crumbs on the table. And she had voiced her opposition to having the Alaska Native corporations be able to take some of that $8 billion. And she said now it's going to be an even smaller piece of the pie for 574 federally recognized tribes. So besides—
Patty, just a clarification, the 500 plus tribes, you said they were in the lower 48. That number includes the Alaska tribes,
Yeah.
the 220. Yeah.
Clarifying that, yes, because yes, you're right. There are the tribes up there too. So, and there was a couple of groups that came out also in opposition of Tara Sweeney, and that included, as you mentioned, the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, and also the Navajo Nation wrote a letter in opposition to having Alaska Native corporations have a part of that $8 billion.
Right. So this was going back and forth between the tribes and the Department of Interior, and the some of the Alaska Native corporations weighed in with a vote of support for Tara Sweeney. What happened yesterday is Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer sent out a tweet criticizing the Department of Interior's decision and alleging that there was bias because of Tara Sweeney's being there. And she sent back a tweet that said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was basically to the effect, this is really ignorant and despicable
Low attack.
take.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then the governor of Alaska, Michael Dunleavy, and Alaska's congressional delegation all weighed in, with, Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska called it BS. And so it's kind of escalating with the war of words. There's been one tribe that said it will file an injunction if the department starts distributing the money to Alaska, if it implements their decision that Alaska Native corporations should get money.
Yes, that's a lawsuit that the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe has said they will file if, as you said, the money starts being dispersed to the Alaska Native corporations. And there are two laws or two definitions and two different pieces of law that are impacting this. The Public Law 93-638 is one, and then of course the Indian Self-Determination Act. And it just shows you how much regulation there is around Indian people.
Well, Public Law 93-638 is the Indian Self-Determination and Educational Assistance Act.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a definition in that law, right?
Yes. So it's so we've got this legal battle brewing, and I'm not sure. Have you heard when the $8 billion will start to be dispersed?
Well, today is the deadline for Native corporations and tribes to file. It's not really an application. They're calling it a certification, and then they haven't said when the money would. I think they did. Isn't it in the General Act that all the money will go out by April 23rd or something like that? Anyway, the date for distribution of the money is coming right up. It's all happening very quickly.
Well, so much happening, with the funding of the CARES Act, and even individual monies. The people who are receiving their $1,200 checks or more, depending on how large their families are, and that's again another aspect that we're working on, the story that Dalton Walker is working on, which will come out this weekend on IndianCountryToday.com, and it's about the scams. So from large tribal governments to individual people, there's a lot of concern out there about how people are going to get their money safely and then use it in wise ways. Chris, let me go back to you. Have you heard of anybody at Oneida Nation who's received their money from the CARES Act?
I can't speak knowledgeably about the CARES Act at all. Unfortunately, I just don't know enough about it.
You haven't heard people saying, I got my money, so I'm going to go spend something, or?
Oh, as far as you mean the $1,200 federal fund, the $1,200, yes. As far as I know, everybody's got it. So a vast majority of people have. What they're planning on using it for is, I'm hearing everything ranging from catching up on bills, keeping typical groceries, things of that nature, and saving money for rent, mortgages, things like that. I myself personally, that's exactly what I'm doing myself. So saving it, and you never know. So it's probably a good thing to hang on to.
Yes. So in your area, there are a lot of people do go out and hunt and fish and also gather wild rice. Has that picked up in this whole pandemic craziness?
As far as driving around myself, I've noticed people out there doing a lot of fishing. A lot more people are out with their families. I mean, separated, obviously, but they have a child with them. They're out doing some fishing. I've seen a few people with bows. Interestingly, that you mentioned that, though, up here in Wisconsin, especially the northern part now, we're regarded as what a lot of people, snowbirds, come up from the southern states for the summer. Come up here, up to the Oneida area, up to our neighbors next door to us, the Menominee Nation people. They've actually come out and asked people in northern towns in northern Wisconsin, and the Menominee Nation have asked people to actually not come up at all this year in an attempt to keep the COVID from spreading. So yes, people are getting out locally and doing their thing, and I don't think they're getting a whole lot of backlash for it, anything like that. But southern people have been asked to stay home, those that migrate up here for the summer months.
Yes, so that's something that they can do and continue to have food in their homes.
Correct.
So Patty, I'll mention, I can mention that in Alaska, some of the tribes actually have been handing out money for fuel, and they've been providing ammunition to hunters in their communities. And the hunters have been going out and hunting for caribou and going fishing. And so everybody in Indian country knows that we've had terrible epidemics, and the Spanish, measles, chickenpox, flu, colds, tuberculosis, which is still hanging on here in Alaska. And so people are very, there's been word of mouth, stories that have come down through time about what villages did and how they protected themselves. So one of the things they did was they cut off travel from outside the village into their communities. The other thing that they know is that there were people who starved after the Spanish influenza in 1918. And so they want to go into this in case food is cut off, the food supply chain. They want to at least go into it with full freezers. And so that's something that the tribes have been working on here. The Tanana Chiefs Conference, which is a regional tribal entity in the interior of the state, asked the Department of Fish and Game for a special out-of-season harvest permit so that each village could go out and get 1 or 2 moose. And the Department of Fish and Game said that the numbers of moose were not such that they could permit that.
Wow. So, and very quickly, give us an update on the fishing industry. Is that still going forward?
Yes. And so I talked about this the last time I was on a couple of weeks ago, where Bristol Bay, Alaska is the country's #1 state for value and tonnage of fish. And most of that, or I shouldn't say most of it, but the biggest port is in Bristol Bay, or the biggest fisheries is in Bristol Bay, and is followed by Dutch Harbor. So in Bristol Bay, 14,000 people come in to work, to fish, and to work, or 12 to 14,000 come in to fish and then to work in fish processing plants. And so in Bristol Bay, you have villages of maybe 500 to 800 people, and Dillingham, the largest community in the region, is only 2,300. So, locals are really worried about this influx. They're going to be completely inundated with people coming in from out of state. So what the state did is it told fish processors, anybody who was going to be importing workers, they told them to come up with a plan that outlined how they were going to keep the disease from spreading. The companies have filed the plans with the state. However, the locals were not necessarily part of that process. So they haven't seen the plans, and the state isn't releasing them. So they don't, they might know some of what a local company is planning, but they might not. And so what I know some companies have said is that they're going to take people's temperatures in Anchorage when they get here, and they're going to quarantine them either in Anchorage or in the community for 14 days. And they're going to take temperatures every day at the processing plants where people work shoulder to shoulder. And they're setting up areas where people can be quarantined if it turns out that they become ill.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, you know, you look in Bristol Bay, there are 4 beds suitable for taking care of somebody with coronavirus.
So definitely not enough. Joaqlin Estus, our national correspondent based in Anchorage, Alaska, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And we also want to thank Chris Johnson, reporter for Kalihwisaks, which is the Oneida Nation newspaper in Wisconsin. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Patty.
And a reminder, our newscast is posted on our platform, IndianCountryToday.com at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. Thank you for joining us. Have a safe weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
This is Indian Country Today.